Alright, hello and welcome to another TCGplayer.com video. I'm playing a Bant Spirit deck featuring Taloisp for today. It's kind of like a modification of Caleb Durward's deck, which actually I was planning on playing, but I played it in several events and it just went 3-2 in a bunch of leagues and dropped out of some leagues. It didn't feel that good, so I had the idea to try out Taloisp. Anyway, the idea is you're a tempo deck. You're kind of playing with some interesting creatures because like creatures that normally wouldn't be played in any other modern deck that don't have synergy. But you have a lot of spirits, and you have Mausoleum Wonder and Spellqueller, which kind of like allow you to interact with your opponent while beating them down. Gives you a little bit of counterplay towards other combo decks and even control decks. So let's get into the deck tech. 21 lands. I think this is one short, actually. I did something this time that I don't normally do, and I'm doing a deck tech after I've already completed the league, so I know exactly a few more things about this deck. Actually, there's one card missing out of the sideboard. That's weird. I don't know exactly what that was off the top of my head. I'll think about that as I'm going through. Anyway, I think the 21 lands is a bit short, but we have 21 lands. We have 2 Botanical Sanctums and 3 Razor-Rich Thickets, which are just kind of our fast lands, which are good, allow you to play your spells early without taking damage. Then we just have a fetch base. Right now I'm playing 3 Windswept Heath, 2 Misty Rainforest, 3 Flooded Strand. Kind of a weird split, but you're kind of not splashing anything. You're splashing green, sort of, but your green cards are your most important cards. So we're pretty even on the sources. So 8 fetches, 4 Shocklands, 2 Breeding Pools, 1 Temple Garden, 1 Hollow Fountain, just an extra breeding pool so you don't run out of lands. 1 of each basic, and then 1 Cavern of Souls. I think I probably would go back to be playing the 22nd land, which is kind of an action land. It would probably be a Moorland Haunt or Gabney Township. But let's get into it. I'll go over the creatures first. We have 4 Mausoleum Wanderers, 4 Noble Hierarch. Pretty much always looking to open on one of these. It's a really slow deck, assuming you're not playing something on turn 1. Then we have 3 Selfless Spirits, 4 Taloisps, and 3 Rattle Chains. Kind of weird split between Selfless Spirit and Rattle Chains. I think that there are some matchups where Rattle Chains is absurd, giving your other spirits flash. But I think I don't really want to go below 3 Selfless Spirits, and I don't want to go like way heavy on 2 drops. Because you're trying to skip 2 and you're trying to like play play your powerful 3 drops. Like Selfless Spirit is just so good against sweepers that you need so many. Like there's so many games where I'm just playing all this stuff out. My opponent's plan is to like anger me or Supreme Verdict me, and I just have a Selfless Spirit or can Coco into one, so it doesn't really matter. Then we have 3 Drogskull Captains, or 4 Drogskull Captains, 3 Geist. I think probably we want another Geist. It's just so good in the enchantment base of this deck. And then 4 Spellquellers are kind of like the thing that pulls this deck together. The ability to just... There are so many games that end with you with 1 or 2 Spellquellers in play that like with spells under them, and your opponent just loses. Just being able to pinch them on their important spells and sort of 2-for-1 them and temple them out before they can deal with it is nice. And then obviously Coco. Very hard to fit enough enchantments and Cocos in this deck. So I think that it's possible that there's a version of this deck, like a more dedicated Taloisp version that doesn't have Coco. Coco isn't that great in this deck. It's like just a really efficient use of your mana, and it's nice to get some extra threats out there and grind out your opponents. It doesn't do anything that spectacular, but I think that it's probably reasonable to just always play 4 and only rarely side some number out. And then we'll go into the Taloisp package. So we have 1 Rancor, 1 Oppressive Rage, 1 Guard Duty, 1 Temporal Isolation, 1 Steel Guard, and 1 Unflinching Courage. 6 is a lot, but because part of the reason that you want so many is just the games where you have Taloisp going, like you just draw so many cards off of it. It's really good. It's really powerful. The Taloisp itself is actually a reasonable body, like a 1/3 for 2. Obviously, isn't great in Modern, but it applies it's decent on defense, and your creatures aren't very hard hitting. If you have a Noble Hierarch or a Drogskull Captain, you can start getting in with a Taloisp for 2, and it also is like a great body to put Unflinching Courage or Rancor on, which is nice. But anyway, that's the split. I think that probably moving forward, I won't play the Guard Duty. It was not great for me because if you Guard Duty if you have a Taloisp and you're triggering it and you Guard Duty something, whatever you Guard Duty just gets to block the Taloisp for free, which I don't like that much. Oppressive Raise is actually good, and is like nice against a card like Ravager or Steel Overseer. Actually, actually kind of deals with it, where Guard Duty does not, which is kind of important. Temporal Isolation I think is actually really good. Like having one that has flash is important. So I think playing that is nice. It's kind of weird not playing Paths. It's probably just wrong, but so far I've done pretty well. Like I played 2 events with this. I always call them dailies, but they're leagues, and I've went 4-1 both times, which is actually not that unreasonable. Steel, go ahead and encourage. There are a lot of games where even against decks that like aren't trying to raise your life total, just giving your creature +2/+2, like it doesn't sound great, but just giving you the unblockable or giving you the +2/+2 to allow like a dorky creature like Talwisp to attack into a board where it couldn't normally is good. And that's pretty much it for the main deck. Like you're playing a tempo game, you're trying to keep hands that have the Noble Hierarchs and Wanderers. That's another reason I kind of like Oppressive Raise is like on the draw, Pseudo gives you more 1-drops as opposed to Path, which you can't use. But let's go ahead into the sideboard right now. Oh man, I'm missing a card here. I cannot for the life of me think of what it is. But anyway, I must have gotten dragged off somewhere, but we have 2 Path to Exiles. Yeah, you still want Path if you play against some decks like Death Shadow Zoo and Infect. You just want an affinity. You want as many of that effect as possible. Part of the weaknesses of building the deck this way is you don't have access to 4 Paths. But like I said, when you have Coco and Talwisp, that really kind of cuts down on your ability to play, like put other spells in your deck. Like your spells need to either be enchantments or creatures that cost 3 or less, which you would think makes the deck bad, but the deck plays out pretty well. But anyway, 2 Path to Exiles, 2 Windborn Muse. Actually been kind of impressed by this guy. There are a lot of decks, like any of the pump spell decks, where like Coco is just slow because Coco doesn't really interact. We don't have Reflector Mage in our deck and Spell Queller, so we're not like guaranteed to interact off of a Coco. So in those matchups, like Affinity and Infect and Death Shadow Zoo and just regular Zoo and I guess weird decks like Living End and stuff, like you kind of would rather, maybe not Living End, maybe that's a good example, but there are matchups where you'd rather have Windborn Muse than Coco. Like I even cut a Coco to put in these 2. So I think that Windborn Muse is actually pretty nice. And you'll maybe see it a few times today. Qasali Pride Mage, kind of weird, like one of, but you want a way of killing an artifact enchantment, a card like Ensnaring Bridge, Blood Moon, Batterskull, just having one. Obviously, like, our sideboard is really tight, because we need, like, the Affinity and Dredge Hate cards, but I think that having at least one Pride Mage is pretty important. Not a bad threat, either on its own. Like, a lot of matchups against Control. Part of the problem with this sideboard was I don't have that many cards against Control, so just having another card to put in to cut out like a bad Guard Duty is bad. Spellskite, just reasonable against any, same thing, Become Immense decks. Actually good against a lot of the Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix decks because just protects your more important threats. Rest in Peace, for Dredge, mostly, but for Living End and Grixis, it's really good against 2 Ravenous Traps. Kind of like, the Dredge is really, I think, the best deck right now, and Ravenous Trap is just, having enough hate is super important. Like, beating the deck, I'm not going to say beating the deck is easy, but that deck plays Nature's Claim and Abrupt Decay, and they're trying to fight on an axis to kill these kind of cards. So having, like, an angle where you're beating them without, playing an enchantment is nice. Rest in Peace might even be better, and it might be correct to play a 4th one, but sometimes if you're on the draw, and you don't have a Mausoleum Wanderer, they have a Cathartic Rune on turn 2, they can just get an Amalgam and some Bloodghasts, maybe 2 Amalgams and a few Narcomoebas in play before you can even get your Rest in Peace down. So that's the reason that Ravenous Trap is kind of good. In this deck, you can just lose. If they put like a 3/3 and a 2/1 and 2 1/1s into play, like they might just be able to beat you even if you Rest in Peace on turn 2, And then we have Stony Silence, Affinity, Tron, Ad Nauseam. If you're playing white, you just have 2 of these in your sideboard. 1 Kataki, another Spirit, something to hit off Coco. Thought my Affinity matchup is probably weak. Not in love with this card. Probably wouldn't play it again. I'm not sure if it's even better than Stony Silence, but you can hit it off Coco, and it does trigger Talwisp, which is nice. I think one of the big things is that I think I should play like a big enchantment in my sideboard. Like I think Angelic Destiny is the best one. Let me see if I can show you guys that. And then anyway, that's the deck. I mean, I think that I'm probably gonna play it this weekend at the Grand Prix, which is kind of crazy. because I don't think that I played all week with different decks, and then the 2 leagues I played in with this deck, I went 4-1 both times, and it felt pretty strong. Definitely felt pretty strong. So anyway, here's Angelic Destiny. Didn't play it, but I think it's probably pretty good. It just gives you a way of grinding against Jund decks. Just gives you a way of like making your Talus actually good when you don't actually want to get like guard duties and Oppressive Raise. So that's it, and thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the rounds of Modern.